chapter 4. Welcome to Riverside Baptist Church, Kenly, North Carolina. Thank you for joining us online this morning. Memorial Day. We want to thank all those that have served our country, fought for our freedom. We want to thank those that died, the families of those that had a loss because of someone that died for freedom in our country. You know, patriotism in our country is probably not at a high point right now. However, I remind you that right after 9/11, we became a very patriotic country. When the attack was here evident in our homeland. I grew up, I was taught this. Some may disagree with it. I understand so if you do. But I was taught you either fight them here or you'll fight them there. Much better to fight on their turf than ours. Some may disagree with that. I understand what your thoughts are. You're entitled to that aspect of it. But I'm here to tell you, the United States of America has been in a battle for its freedom for a long time. Our battle today has turned within instead of without. You say, preacher, that's not good preaching. Well, that's not my message. So anyway, you heard it for free. You don't have to pay nothing for it. All right. As I said today, we're going to be in 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and Joshua chapter 4. Memorial Day is an official holiday in most states of the United States. You say, what do you mean? Well, it was observed in May 30th until it was observed on May 30th until 1971. That date was changed to the last Monday in May, with the exception of Louisiana. The custom of placing flowers on the graves began on May 5th of 1866 in Waterloo, New York. Waterloo's been recognized by Congress as the official birthplace of Memorial Day. In 1868, there was a general, John Logan, then president of the Grand Army of the Republic, declared that May 30th would be a day to decorate with flowers the graves of comrades who died in defense of our country during that time. After World War I, the day was set aside to honor all of the American wars, and the custom has been extended. There's a typical ceremony on Memorial Day. It's placing a flower at the tomb of the unknowns, the tomb of the unknown soldier. Interesting enough, some years back, I was able to go to the tomb of the unknown. Some things that I found out, and I don't remember all the details, but I will tell you this, that guard that's there, it's a commitment, a big commitment. In other words, before they ever walk out in public, there's an extensive training that is held, and that person must pass that test in order to be qualified to even be a guard at the tomb of the unknown. There have been incidences where they have tried to stop the guard at the tomb of the unknown because of weather. And they said, no, we will do it. We will continue. It's instilled in them. Some of the things, and I'm not 100% sure I'm right on it. I am close to right. I may not have the exact detail. I'm going to look around. I'm going to make sure I'm right. Okay. The only one in this room at this present time that's probably qualified physically to be a guard at the tomb of the unknown is Gabe. Does that surprise anybody? Because there was a condition that said the tomb of the unknown guard could be no larger than 30 inches in the waist. Some of you look down like, wow, I caught me off guard. There are, now I don't know if that blew my mind. I'm like, wow, that's a pretty impressive assignment. And then the criteria for it. What are you saying, preacher? I'm saying there is an emphasis from our country to honor those that have died for our cause, for our freedom. That emphasis has been there long before you and I. But there's an attack on it today from within. As you continue on with aspects from Memorial Day, we celebrate Memorial Day once a year, but every day should be a Memorial Day. We mourn the loss of those that have died, but we remember their lives. We quickly tie the death of Christ, a sacrifice for our freedom, with those that have died for our country. As a matter of fact, in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, beginning in verse 23, a very familiar passage, it is often used when we have communion. I'll not read the extended passage for all of it. I will only read a portion of it, and once I emphasize one aspect of it, we will move to Joshua chapter 4. For I have received, in verse 23, 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 23. For I have received of the Lord that which also I delivered unto you, that the Lord Jesus, the same night in which he was betrayed, took bread, and when he had given thanks, he brake it and said, Take, eat, this is my body, which is broken for you. The next phrase, this do you in remembrance of me. This do in remembrance of me. And then in verse 25, after the same manner also he took the cup when he had supped, saying, This cup is the New Testament in my blood. This do ye as often as ye drink it in remembrance of me. We mourn the loss, but we remember the lives. We mourn the loss, but we remember the lives. Mourning the loss of those that have died. One question that's asked: if only I had done such and such. If only I had not done such and such. If I could go back and redo something. If I had told them I loved them more. We mourn that loss. It's a void. It's difficult when you have a loved one that dies. But when you have a loved one that has died in war. I went to Community Baptist Church, which is a military-oriented church with the Marine Corps. Not long after I was there, this young man came to me and told me he was being deployed. I have two daughters, Katie and Camille. At that time, Katie and Camille were getting ready to go back to college. The very same week that they got in the car and went to college, I go to Jacksonville, North Carolina, where this young fellow, about their same age, was going off to war. He was being deployed. It ripped my heart out. My two daughters were coming here for a short period of time, just a week or two, and they were going to come back home for a visit. This man was being gone. You understand, this is a 22-year-old young man. I'm standing there as he's getting ready to get on the bus, and here's a grown man with his family standing over here with tears running down his face. I thought to myself, man, this is hard. There's a family, there's a mom over here with tears running down her face. He stayed in contact with me, and throughout his deployment, the contact deteriorated some. He returned home. I knew he was coming back. Talked with him a little bit, but he was different. Had a couple of conversations with him. I do know what his position was in war and what he did. And he struggled with death. He came back a changed person. He didn't physically die in war. He was in a very dangerous position. But he was very familiar with death. To the point when you pull the trigger and kill someone, it's hard to deal with. War has a lot of conflict, not just openly on a battlefield, but internal with an individual. The cause of war, the conflict of war, the list could go on and on. While we mourn the loss, we remember their lives. We mourn the loss of Christ, but we remember his life. Folks, he was brutally beaten. He was wrongfully crucified. Horrible agony, shame, pain. He became our sacrifice for our sin. As those that stood by the grave and those women that went there, they were mourning the loss of Christ. Today, remembering the life of Christ, he conquered death, hell, and the grave. He's alive forevermore. Easter, folks, is not just about the death, it's about the resurrection. But we remember what Christ did for you and I. We take someone today, their life ends, some type of funeral or whatever may be associated with it, and some type of graveside service, and some head marker or headstone, and things that are inscribed on it. Beloved son, beloved daughter, though we will miss you, we know where you are, safe in the arms of Jesus, faithful until death, gone but not forgotten, the Lord is my shepherd. Trust in the Lord with all thy heart, and lean not to thy own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him. Epitaphs, things that are on a grave marker. We remember the life. And while I'm on it, what is your life? The Bible said it is a vapor that appears for a little time, then vanisheth away. What is your life? It is the dash. Born, death. Your life is the dash between the two. We remember the lives. In my family, there's of course, it happened long before I was really born, even remember anything about it. My grandmother had a hope chest and had an American flag in that hope chest. Cedar chest, hope chest, whatever you call it. That flag was on the casket of a family member connected with me that died in war. His name was Kenneth. When I come along and they named me Kenneth, somehow she got the flag, she put it up for me. We remember the lives of those that died. We still hear about people that die because of war. We still hear about the Lord Jesus Christ that died for our sin. That's a blessing, folks. In remembering these things, I have another passage of Scripture I want you to turn to in Joshua chapter 4. And not taking away from Christ at all, but He is our emphasis, and He is the one we're to be concerned about. He is the one that we're to exalt and honor and lift up. And yes, He died for our freedom. And there are many others that have died for our freedom in this life. But Jesus did something no other man could do. Remembering the lives. Let's look at Joshua chapter 4, verse 1 through 9. And it came to pass, when all the people were clean passed over Jordan, that the Lord spake unto Joshua, saying, Take ye 12 men out of the people, out of every tribe of man, and command ye them, saying, Take you hence out of the midst of Jordan, out of the place where the priest's feet stood firm, 12 stones. And ye shall carry them over with you, and leave them in the lodging place where ye shall lodge that night. Then Joshua called the 12 men whom he had prepared of the children of Israel out of every tribe of man. Joshua said unto them, Pass over before the ark of the Lord your God in the midst of Jordan. And take you up every man of you a stone upon his shoulder, according unto the number of the tribes of the children of Israel, that this may be a sign among you, that when your children ask their fathers in time to come, saying, What mean ye by these stones? I'm going to stop there. What mean ye by these stones, as we remember the lives? I have taken Memorial Day and preached message after message on those 12 stones. I'll talk about the 2 memorials in just a moment, just a little bit. But my emphasis has always been on those 12 stones and what they represent. But today, I want to focus on this. One phrase, one question. What mean ye by these stones? What does a head marker mean? A grave marker. It's a stone. It's about remembering the life. It doesn't replace them. It remembers them. What do you think? What's the big deal, preacher? It's real simple to understand. It gives us an anchor in our life. It tells us about our history, a connection. You are probably aware, you've heard me talk about it, in school, high school, college, history was not a good subject for me. Neither was English, science, and math, and history was not a good subject for me. In college, Dr. Anderson, he could rattle off the facts about history, this, that, and the other. I really struggled with his class. U.S. history. I went to him and talked to him several times. I said, I don't get it. I said, how do you know all this stuff? He said, son, to you it's history. To me it was current facts. In other words, he lived it. What mean ye by these stones? There's a generation coming along today that cares nothing about where we come from. They don't have the connection. They don't understand what that stone represents. They don't understand the ancient landmarks. which, by the way, you may hear those words next Sunday as well. They don't have that connect. What mean ye by these stones? It's a reminder of the facts. Not only do we remember the lives, but these stones in this case is a reminder of the facts. What does a cross represent? It's a reminder of the facts. It reminds us of Jesus Christ that took His last breath, that gave His life for our sin. I know I'm online. I also know that what I'm about to say may come across wrong to some folks. I don't worship the cross. I worship the Christ of the cross. I understand it's there for a purpose. When I see a cross, I see Christ. When I see a cross, I see a symbol of the death, agony, pain, and shame. When I see monuments for those that have battles for our country that have died, I see individuals that lost their life. I don't see it as a hate symbol. Hello. I don't. I can't help it if you do. I don't. A reminder of the facts. During this time right here in Joshua, you understand it was a huge transitional period. Moses, their leader, had died. Joshua had taken over. They had gone from the wandering of the wilderness. They're going to the promised land. A major transition's taking place. A reminder of the facts. Those stones that were placed over there was for a future generation to ask, what mean ye by these stones? It's to remind them of how God delivered them. And folks, there's nothing better than riding down the road and seeing an old-fashioned white church out in the countryside. And maybe you got a child or a grandchild riding with you, and you look and you point it out and you say, hey, you see that white church? You see that steeple up there? You see the cross on top of that steeple? Hey, did you know that you had a great-great-great-great-great-great-granddaddy? A great-great-great-great first cousin? Somebody that went to that church? You know what? I have sat in the room with my grandfather, and when we got through talking, we were related to the dog. This is the area we live in. You know what? I wouldn't take anything in the world for that, because I got a connection with people today. It don't mean we're all hunky-dory, love one another, put your arm around them and say, hey, you're my brother. No, it's not that. But it gives you a sense of, oh yeah, so-and-so got, and it can get so confusing. Oh, you know over there where so-and-so used to live, and so-and-so this. Oh yeah, that's your second cousin. Huh? How did they get to be my second cousin? I come to the conclusion after first cousin, I don't keep up with it anyway. Some of you are thinking, well, I could mark them off my list too. The facts of where we come from, what we've dealt with, who has paid the price. It dealt with an incredible miracle of God bringing His people to the promised land. It's about how God has protected and provided for His people. We could do the same today for our country. Think of the battles we have fought. Think of the enemies. By the way, enemies of the United States are real. In my lifetime, again, I'm glad TJ's back today. He is the complaint department. If you're listening and you want his phone number, we'll be glad to give it to you. You and I grew up, our country, the enemy was on the outside. Not anymore. Not anymore. God has protected the United States of America. There ought to be memorials built for that protection. There have been those that have fought for our freedom. There ought to be memorials built. We ought to remember the facts. Not only is it a remembrance of facts and remembering the lives, but there's a reflection of their faith. Years ago, I preached a message about this, and interesting enough, and that is, there's 2 sets of 12 stones. One's on the outside to be seen. One's on the inside that's not seen. Inside the river, they built 12, put them up, put 12 out there. What mean you by these stones? Those in the river, the water come, you didn't see them. I preached a message about what purpose did they serve? You could put rocks under the water. Usually the current comes through and you'll see a little ripple. You know, it's some distinction there. If it's deep enough, you may not see it at all. Every outward action deals with the inward conviction. I preached a connection there. What is it about it? Not only are we remembering the facts, but we think about this aspect of it. It's a reflection of their faith. Folks, I'm here to tell you, God does things that people see. But God does things that people don't see. That's a reflection of your faith. What do you mean? It's impossible for one to please God without faith. Yeah. A faith in something you can't see. Without faith, as I said, it's impossible to please God. Without faith, it's impossible for a man to be saved. You can remember the facts about Christ dying on the cross, folks, but unless you believe He died for your sin, you're not saved. That's your faith. And lastly, this morning, not only do we remember the lives, we're reminded of the facts. It's a reflection of their faith. This one's kind of challenging. So what is it? What mean you by these stones, Granddad? It's reinforcement for the future. What mean you by these stones? What are they for? I had the privilege of growing up and spending time with 2 grandfathers. My father died when I was 17. But I spent an extended period of time with one grandfather, more so than the other, because one passed away earlier. But even then, growing up as a child, I spent time with my grandfathers. I know the facts. I know their faith. It's reinforced me today. I want to share with you a little story about a trip that was made with my grandfather. I had a first cousin, Terry. He's at the store if you've seen him. We're 18 months apart. We were very close growing up. We did a lot of stuff with our grandfather. My grandfather loved to fish. He loved to hunt. As a matter of fact, people would say he lived to fish and hunt. No, my grandfather hunted and fished to live. It was his life. He grew up, it was a way of putting food on the table. But it was his life also. He loved to take us boys fishing. I'm going to tell you what my grandfather did to me and Terry. We went to the creek. Do y'all know what a creek is? He took us to the creek. And my grandfather was really a smart man when it come to catching fish. He said you can go with a pole and a hook. And he liked doing that some. He said, but if you really want to catch fish, we'll go with the net. Now, if any of you know anything about it at all, it is against the law to set a net in public waters. You can set them in a private pond, but in a creek, it was against the law. So, number one, we were not supposed to do it. However, we knew we were not supposed to do it. And not only did we know we were not supposed to do it, we were taught we were not supposed to talk about it. I'm breaking that rule now. We would go to the creek, and if you didn't take a boat. To start with, he'd drive his pickup truck, which was beat all to pieces, and yes, it was a Chevrolet. He'd drive it out across somewhere, running over trees about that big, knocking them down. I've heard him say it multiple times. The path used to be here. We'd get down there, we'd get out, and his biggest thing was we're going to go fishing. He'd always bring us something to eat. He said, let's go set the net. Well, we didn't know any better. We went traipsing off down through there. He had the net. We got down there, and I looked around, and I said, how are we going to do this? He said, it's real simple. Get in the water. Granddad, Grandma ain't going to want me to get wet and with these clothes on. He said, that ain't a problem. Take the clothes off. He said, when you get home, it'll be dry. Just lay them right over there. You're fine. We get in this water. I don't know how deep it was. In places you probably couldn't touch the bottom. Places you probably could. But do you know a creek is muddy? Did you know a creek is not like a swimming pool at all? Do you know there are creatures swimming around in that water? So we pulled the net across, and then you know what he said? Okay, run the fish in the net. You want me to do what? Yeah, go over there to those holes up there and run your hands up under them tree stumps and slosh it around and move it and scare all the fish so they get in the net. Granddad, there's something in here besides fish. Oh, they won't bother you. Terry run his hands up under there, and all of a sudden I'm standing beside him, and something crawls out over his shoulder. It wasn't a snake, it was an eel. It might as well been a snake. I was gone. My granddad did something with me that I would never dare do with my grandchildren. I'm scared to death to go down there. You know why I'm scared to death down there? He traumatized me. Hey, Ken, come here. While we're down here, let me show you something. You see that marker right there? Yeah. That's the corner of the property. Really? Yeah, that's the corner of the property. It runs from right here. And he said, I'll show you the map at home. But if you ever need to come back, there it is right there. What are you saying? It's real simple. My granddad instilled something in me, fishing at the creek, way more than catching a fish. Folks, those stones, those memorials, those things that we put up in our lives have a whole lot to do with the future. This was important to my granddaddy. This was important to my father. This was important. It's reinforcement for the future. Folks, when we talk about the cross with our children and grandchildren and about Jesus dying on the cross, it's reinforcement for them. When we hold up the Bible, God's holy word, which we talk about as a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our path, that will hide its words in our heart that we might not sin against thee. That's reinforcement for the future generations. You know, again, there's a few folks in here that are probably under 40 years of age. But for those that are 50 years of age and older, you know, you're not looking on the young side no more. I mean, let's face it, folks. What are we going to leave for the next generation? We're going to leave them some stones that they can say, when they ask the question, what mean you by these stones? Or what are these stones for? One of them will stand up and say, oh, I remember my granddaddy would tell me about this. Well, they know what they're about. When they ride, folks, let's fast forward. Let me make the picture real clear. When they ride down the road out here 100 years from now, and they see Riverside Baptist Church, the shell of the building standing here, and somebody rides by and they say, what's that for? Are they going to know? Well, preacher, I'd like to think they would. Well, I hope the Lord comes back. I understand that, but what's going to be here? They're going to have a creek down there. Are they going to know that? I'll probably get in trouble for this one, but 225 years ago, a church was built here, and folks used to get baptized down there with all them snakes and creepy crawly things. They're going to know. Reinforcement for the future. Not remembering the lives. Remembering the facts. A reflection of our faith reinforcement for the future. What mean ye by these stones? Thank you for joining us at Riverside Baptist Church, Kenly, North Carolina. What stones are you putting down?